we have tons to talk about looking ahead, but let's spend a little bit of time just looking back at the buoying results of the week. I guess the question is, were the polls that were consistently pointing to a distinctly better night for Republicans wrong? Or did something happen that they were right, but created a Democratic last minute surge over the last 72 hours? History will tell the tale there, but I just wonder if anybody has a kind of a sense of what happened to create the better than expected performance.
I just think polling is bad.
Yeah.
and it usually has been bad, for example, in 16 and 20 in the wrong direction. And so it was scary. But my wife said this last night. Franny said this last night, Heidi. She said, the American people said, stop it. This was getting really frightening, our democracy. So it turns out that Roe and democracy were bigger than the economy and crime, I think. And it's astounding what happened. This is ahistorical, what happened yesterday. And thank God.
Yeah, I mean, just by numbers, going back to 2002, where there were regular losses of 30 or more seats. The pollsters did try on this. There was in the summer, people were calling out democracy and abortion, Dobbs as salient, and then less so in October and November. But there's a lot of reasons, at least from the exit polls, to think abortion, for one, really did matter. Do you have a sense of whether it was a kind of national sort of, as Franny puts it, like, stop this crap? Or was it sort of state by state and it just added up?
I think the first thing that we need to think about, and I know it's not popular, but the polls weren't really that wrong. If you consider that they were all within the margin of error, that we were told that Nevada would be close, that Arizona would be close, Georgia would be close, Pennsylvania would be close. They were all close, and they were all within the margin of error. On the kind of sweep that you would expect in the House of Representatives, I want you to think about the fact that in 2020, we went into that race thinking if we won the presidency, there would be a 20 to 30 seat swing to the Democratic side. Guess what? We lost 15 seats. And so if you think about kind of the trend line, a lot of low-hanging fruit in the House of Representatives went in 2020. And so had we won those seats, you would have seen probably a bigger swing. But at the end of the day, and most of the pollsters would tell you there wasn't a lot of public polling in August. So we weren't seeing the slide. But we also were behind the curve on the return back to the Democratic Party. And so I think a lot of wishful thinking, and I think there was a lot of junk polling that the Republicans dumped into the national average. And as a result, we ended up, kind of maybe being led down the primrose path that this was going to be a big sweep. But if you looked at the raw data, it wasn't that far off.
So Democrats clearly overperformed. And I think one reason is our messaging of putting people over politics and focusing on lower costs, safer communities, and better paying jobs resonated with the American people. At the same time, I do think Senator Franken is right that abortion and democracy weighed heavily on people's minds. And you can see that with the number of Democratic Secretary of State candidates who all won. And in terms of polling, the reason it's bad is not because many pollsters are bad. It's because political polling is somewhat different. Polling in general is actually pretty darn accurate at assessing preferences. So if there was a poll, for example, that said, hey, do you prefer Lucky Charms cereal or Frosted Flakes cereal? And it came out 55-45. You can bet it's pretty accurate that across America, that's what people believe. But political polling has to do one more thing, which is predict 3 weeks from now, do you go buy Lucky Charms cereal, or do you switch your mind to Frosted Flakes cereal, or do you not buy any cereal at all? And that is a pure guess. And at that point, pollsters are literally making predictions. They're no longer assessing preferences. And that's why the polling can be all over the place.
I know it's not an article of faith, but I think that if you actually objectively looked at the polling, it wasn't that far off. What we got wrong and what the pollsters got wrong was momentum. They assumed that the momentum was then trend lines were going to continue. They really underestimated, especially in states like Michigan, states like Pennsylvania, the significance of abortion, the significance of Roe v. Wade being overturned. And so I think it was more of a momentum failure to determine kind of where the wave was going. And, the bottom line is, I think the mistake that the Democrats would make, and with all due deference to the congressman, is assuming that your economic message won. What won on Tuesday was the Supreme Court reversing Roe v. Wade and Donald Trump putting himself on the ballot and reminding people, we don't want that chaos. We don't want that crazy back. And so Donald Trump has more to do with the Democratic victory than what I think people are giving him credit for.
The demographics also of the turnout was different than I think pollsters thought too, which was that we just had a lot of young people turning out.
Very ahistorical there, right? They disappoint election after election, but not.
Why
this
would
time.
young people be activated by Roe?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Who could have
Not that.
anticipated that?
So my son, who's a sophomore in college, he's a Bernie supporter, and he was sort of down on Democrats because he didn't think we're doing enough in a whole bunch of areas. And then he saw a January 6th committee hearing, and he came to me and he said, I get it now. I'm voting Democrat. And so I think anyone who watches committee hearings also probably.
So this is your son, and he didn't get it till then? Jesus. What the hell?
I have to put a plug in for the organizational skills of so many young Democrats. Plus, we need to be reminded that the new generation, Generation Z, is much more diverse. And when you look at the breakdown between young people who were, what we traditionally look at brown and black people as opposed to white people, the white students voted pretty balanced. But because we have a majority in this country that is moving towards diversity, you saw that as a double factor. I think it's not just young people, it's young people of color that really carried this election.
Yeah, look, it does feel to me that the Republicans are always doing, final rear guard maneuvers because they're becoming more and more a minority party. But if young voters are really in, that would be a game changer.